Hi, thank you for tuning in to the Finding Harmony podcast with me, your host, Harmony Slater. Hi, welcome to the Finding Harmony podcast. I'm Harmony, and I'm here with Russell Case.
Oh, good morning.
Good morning. And we're joined today by the effervescent Lia Huber. Hello, Lia. How are you?
Hi. Very good. So glad to be here with you guys.
Oh,
I
it's our pleasure.
I'm trying to see just where our nexus of interconnections meet up, and I can't quite place you as like a I'm suspect Illinois Lutheran, but you might be Illinois Shiksa, and I'm trying to figure it out.
Illinois Presbyterian.
Presbyterian. All right, so I'm also Illinois Presbyterian,
No.
but I converted from Judaism. No one told me that I was a Jew, and so then I went Presbyterian in Lawrenceville, Illinois.
Lawrence.
Which is over near Terre Haute, Indiana.
Oh, okay.
On the east side.
Okay.
Yeah, but my family was all from Lincoln.
Okay.
Now, how about you? No.
My family was all from Princeton, Illinois, farm town west towards Iowa.
Towards Iowa, north of St. Louis.
I am really, really bad with directions.
Oh, goodness.
If you went west from Chicago, I'm pretty sure you'd hit Princeton.
Oh, yeah. So you would
just get on the highway and go west.
I've lived in the Bay Area.
You drive through Rockford and
Peoria?
Yeah. I know. Of course, not Peoria. Yeah.
Princeton's right near Peoria. So my mom grew up there. My whole family's there. My dad's from Chicago.
Right.
So
Peoria.
Yeah.
The great Golden State basketball player, Andre Iguodala, is from Peoria.
Oh, yes. I made a custom Iggy T-shirt for my husband last year for Christmas.
No!
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Very, very
Iggy's a dub. Iggy's a Peoria. I think he's like a Hall of Fame Peoria player.
Is he really?
And also the point guard, the really tall one who moves so slowly. I'm going to look him up.
I have a funny story to tell about that T-shirt, about the Iguodala T-shirt. It was like Christmas time, and we couldn't find. He really wanted an Iggy T-shirt. We couldn't find any pre-made ones, so I went to a T-shirt shop, and my daughter and I laid it all out and stuff like that. And it's like Christmas Eve, and we go to pick it up during the day, and we get there, and it says Guadala, no I.
No I. Oh no!
This isn't gonna work. And so he's like, well, I'll just slap it on. And he put it on, and it was like this giant eye. So it was like, Guadala. And I was like, we're going to need to work on this.
Oh, dear.
Oh, my
Sean
gosh.
Livingston and Andre Iguodala, both from Peoria, Illinois.
I did not. Okay, you're educating me on this. I did not know that. We're huge Warriors fans.
The Dubs.
Of course.
I became a Warriors fan after I moved. Well, I moved to San Francisco, but I'd gone to school in Chicago from New Orleans, which I think is where you went to school.
I went opposite, exactly.
You went the opposite direction. You went to Tulane? Is that where you went? Yeah, Tulane. Yeah. Green Wave, right?
Green Wave, which I could never do. It always looked like I was flapping water. Yeah. Thump, thump, thump. Yeah.
So I left New Orleans for Chicago. I went to school in Chicago. And I played basketball in Cabrini Green. That's where I went to go play basketball.
Oh my gosh!
That was a daily event for me. I was going to play basketball. I was the only white boy there most 99% of the time. And because I was the only white boy, I modeled my game after Dennis Rodman as a rebounder, as a guy that would just hustle. But they all called me Steve Kerr, which was, hey, little Stevie Kerr. And I was like, I'm not
look like him.
Oh my God. Because I'm pale. And I was like,
the hair.
I could shoot a little bit, but mostly I was a rebounder. That's what I like to do. And they all call me Steve Kerr. So it's stuck. Little Stevie Kerr is here. And then when he became coach of the Dubs, that became my team. It was like, this is my team. This is what I'm going to do. Sure.
Yeah, that's a clear path. Totally.
Yeah, clear path. Clear path fouls now illegal.
And you were also living in San Francisco.
Yeah, I just moved to San Francisco, but we're talking about Lia. This podcast is about Lia.
Yeah.
So
let's talk about Lia now.
Midwestern, you moved to New Orleans and you're in school at Tulane, and then you come up with lupus.
Yes, after school. But I joke, like looking back, the pain of all of that had started to set in college.
Right.
And like, I mean, let's face it, I was going to college in New Orleans and I was a pretty like out there girl. So I was definitely, partying quite a bit.
You're having a good time.
This was the 90s?
For sure. Yes.
90s.
Yes.
And I think at that time, the most popular thing to do was you go down to the quarter and you'd take nitrous balloons. And the quarter was littered with nitrous canisters.
Oh God, that was awesome. Before me. I was early 90s. So it was more like hurricanes and, oh my God, I'm trying to remember the bar that we used to go to. But anyway. But
we were there like the same time then. We were rubbing elbows.
Yeah. The Rendon Inn.
The Rendon Inn.
Do you remember that? Oh God, they had ladies' night on Wednesday night. But anyway,
I would go to the Blue Crystal.
I was probably the only person looking for a bar stool because it hurt too much to stand. Like it just, the pain had really started to set in. And by the time I graduated and I'd gotten a job in New York City, I would be sitting at my desk. I was, in my early 20s at this point, and my knees would be throbbing. And like, I remember like, I'd be walking, I'd be hunched over and I'm like, I'm 22. Like, this is not,
it's not
right.
normal.
And what am I going to feel like when I'm, 35 or 45?
Right.
It was horrible.
Oh my God.
30.
And I'd go to doctors, and this is a very common story, but they would look at me like I was crazy, and they would look at me like I was making it up, and they would shoot me up with all kinds of shots and this and that. And,
like steroids.
With the steroid shots and the
cortisone.
Cortisone shots. Thank you.
Yeah.
Cortisone, like, oh, your shoulders hurt, cortisone shot. Oh, your hips hurt, cortisone shot.
Right.
And it was awful. And then I met my husband and we moved to San Francisco. And that was when I went to the doctor and he was, diagnosing me, and he's like, you have lupus. And I was like,
wow.
Whoa.
Yeah.
How did he diagnose you? How did he kind of come to that conclusion? Did he do some tests that no other doctors had done, or
it's a tricky diagnosis.
Because it is.
It is. And it's, so part of it was the way that I was presenting pain. Part of it was by that point I had an ANA, an elevated ANA count, which is anti-nuclear antibodies. Can't believe I pulled that out. And there were just markers. There were indicators that it was
in
lupus.
your blood.
Turns out many years later, because I was originally diagnosed with systemic lupus, but part of it also was I had this rash here. But later on, that rash was diagnosed as rosacea. Yeah. And as time went on, they were noticing that even though my joints were really sore, they were never swollen, which was not in line with what systemic lupus is. And so I started to get mixed messages from the doctors. And it was actually my yoga teacher who we were living at the time in Ukiah. We had this is a whole other story, but we had pulled up stakes and driven down to Costa Rica and lived there a while, and then driven back up and landed in Ukiah. And we'd started a yoga practice when we were in Costa Rica. And it was the first time we'd ever done yoga. I felt transformed by it and just more in my body than I'd ever felt. And so we continued that practice when we settled in Ukiah. And there were two amazing yoga teachers there. And I used to often not be able to attend or have to modify because I was in so much pain. And one of them pulled me aside and she's like, "Can I talk to you?" She's like, "This might be overstepping my bounds, but can I give you some material on fibromyalgia?" She's like, "Because from what you're telling me and the way you describe your pain, it's like a perfect fit. And I just wonder." And I remember she had all these printouts for me and I took them home. She was amazing.
Yeah.
And I took them home and I read them. And it was like for the first time ever. So this is, 4 or 5 years of dealing with this in New Orleans and New York. And then, 4 years of being on medication for lupus. Like, so it's 10 years later, right?
Yeah.
I read this stuff and I burst down to tears. And I was like, this is me. Like they talked about the trigger points, like how it's, there's certain areas that just that burn with fibromyalgia. And then there's also this almost like you're sheathed in something, in a bruise, like your whole body is bruised. That didn't line up with the lupus pain,
Right.
So everything lined up with fibromyalgia. So I went to my rheumatologist and I was like, oh my God, like I think I've got fibromyalgia. And he goes, well, of course you do. Like, I'm sure you have fibromyalgia. And I'm like, I don't think I have lupus. And he's like, no, I don't either. I'm like, well, then why have I been on medication for lupus
for
for
lupus.
the last 5 years, right? He's like, well, just in case. And I was like, no.
Just in
So,
case.
just
Oh my
in case.
God.
Just in case. So I went off the
my
lupus
brother's
medication
name.
and over time, taking care of myself, food was a huge part of it. Yoga was a huge part of it. I don't even have any flare-ups anymore. I don't have
that's
fibromyalgia
amazing.
flare-ups anymore.
Wow.
I'm sorry to interrupt. But I wanted to establish that because I know that that a big part of this podcast today is about your book, Nourished, and it's also about your diet and what transformed for you when you made these changes to your diet. So I don't want to be intrusive in any way, but I just wanted to ask what your habits were like, say in New Orleans, because for me, moving to New Orleans and growing up there transformed my aesthetic palette and what I was willing to endure as far as food goes. Because leaving, like for example, leaving New Orleans and going to New York, what my experience was as a young man was that if you go into a restaurant, any restaurant on earth, and if you spend $10, it better be fucking amazing. And I was very quickly disabused of that notion. Most people will give you shit for $10. And I was like, well, this doesn't make any sense at all. This is shit. And it's like, well, you paid $10 for it. It's like, it should be amazing.
Yeah.
So what, I mean, and that's basically, you take, butter and spice and acid and you just go to town. That's what I learned in New Orleans. What were you eating at that time?
A lot of Lucky Dogs.
And beignets. Beignets at 3 a.m.
Yes. Oh, I ate like crap when I was there. I mean, I ate great. Like I ate etouffee and I loved red beans and rice, but it was so during that time I was very much in what I call now the pinnacles of should angst. So I've over many years and working with many people and looking at my own journey, I sort of mapped out 5 stages to what I call a nourish evolution. So you start out blissfully blind. You have no idea the impact that food is having on your body and you don't care. You're just eating anything, And I kind of probably went to New Orleans blissfully blind, but then I'm a girl, right? I'm a young woman. I freshman 15. So very quickly I get into the pinnacles of should angst. And that is where I should, at the time, it was fat free, right? So I should be eating these plain mashed potatoes in the cafeteria. And I should be eating these plain salads with like lemon squeezed over them. But, that felt virtuous. It was awful, but it felt virtuous. And I would do that for like a day. And then at like 2:00 in the morning, I'd, go get a Lucky Dog, and then I'd feel guilty as crap. And then, so that's where the pinnacles of should angst come in. And then in the Nourish evolution, most people, they can live there in should angst for a while, but then they hit their hump. And for me, that lupus diagnosis was my hump. It's where you get to a place where you're like, oh, all of those diets, all of those things, all of those silver bullets that I thought were going to work are not going to work. And I need to dig deeper and I need to ask different questions to be able to find the answer, And that is sort of this wrangling, wrestling process where then when you kind of get to the top of the hump, in the distance, you can see, the land of nourished and you can see what you want to be eating, and how you want to be eating. But then in between those are the peaks and valleys of practice. So that's really where the meal planning approach, the smart meal planning approach comes in. That's where the skills come in. It's where the know-how comes in. We don't give a lot of credence to all of that in our modern society. We think we should just be able to know how to cook. And it doesn't work that way, Right. So it's that peaks and valleys of practice when you get really excited because you want to eat a lot of veggies, and you go to the farmer's market and you buy all these heads of kale, and you come home, and then 5 days later those heads of kale are mush on the bottom of the grocery store, right?
Yellow.
Right.
Yeah.
And this is why I call this an eating practice, because it's very much like a yoga practice where it's like you do that, you get really excited, and then you fail. And then you have to, and most people go, oh, well, I can't cook. That's the way they answer it. I can't cook. I can't cook healthy food. I don't like healthy food. Well, what the hell? You gotta enter back into the ring. You got to get back on the mat and be like, okay, I failed. What did I learn? How can I go about this differently? And that will eventually get you through the peaks and valleys of practice to that land of nourished. So to circle back around, I was not eating well, but there were little amazing snippets like throughout probably a decade of my life where I was learning little bits and kind of absorbing things about food. And one of them in New Orleans, I so distinctly remember this. I was at, that kitchenwares shop right across from the French Market.
Yep.
So I was there. I have no idea why I happened to be there. Paul Prudhomme was there doing a little demo.
Fabulous.
Right?
Wow.
And he was doing a demo. I have no idea why I was there. And there was like nobody in the store. It was like 3 people. And he was essentially I think
just you and him.
It was like me and 3 people. It was crazy.
It's like meeting Julia Child on the street. She just teaches you how to fry an egg.
It was insane. And so he's like, I think he was doing like blackened catfish or something because he was searing something. Yeah. And at the end, after he'd seared it, he's like, and this is the fond. This is where all the magic happens. And he was talking about deblazing a pan, and I was like, oh. So it's
awesome.
the little pieces like that, and then I've just learned so much about food from little gifts in time like that.
That was catfish. I was talking to Harmony about catfish last night. It came up on
MasterChef.
Gordon Ramsay's MasterChef. One of the guys from the Midwest got a catfish, and he's like, I don't know what to do with it, but he ended up winning the episode.
It's from the Midwest. He doesn't know what to do with catfish.
He said he was landlocked.
We don't get that much catfish.
I don't know. But I just said to Harmony last night that blackened catfish or ricochet catfish, as Al Copeland called it, was like, that was for me the first dish where I really understood that there was a different world of food available. Yes. That people that if you were that young people aren't often given the opportunity to eat because it's wasted on young people. They say, this $100 plate we're not going to give it to the 10-year-old, But I remember I was like 14 and I got this blackened catfish at Copeland's, and it was like the understanding that any food can be delicious if you're stacking it in layers of taste. Totally. And at that point, it doesn't matter what the protein is or what the thing is. Like, does it have? Totally. Is it balanced?
Totally.
Well, that's always the thing too that we think about, like, because we've both been vegetarian and like for a long time, and people who aren't vegetarian like sort of struggle a lot of the time with knowing how to feed a vegetarian. Like, oh, well, we'll have salad or pasta, right?
Right. And it's, but it's like, there's a whole world. I absolutely find that, I actually have a course called Home Cooking School. And I started it during the pandemic because so many people came to me, and they're like, I thought I knew how to cook and I could get like some things on the table, but now that I've got to cook every night, I realize I don't really know what I'm doing. And it was such a great opportunity because I'd wanted to take kind of everything that I'd learned over the years and break it down into, here are the foundational skills that you need to know to make good food, to make good tasting, delicious food. And it's based on, what you were talking about, like knowing how to create those layers of flavor. And so part of it is knowing like flavor profiles and understanding how to make those flavor profiles. Part of it is knowing what technique to use to achieve a certain result, like searing, and blackened catfish. It's like you're searing that catfish. There's an alchemy happening between the butter and the catfish and the heat in the pan. Like that's understanding that will transform your cooking. And so it's like, when people tell me like, oh, I'm a bad cook, I ask them, I'm like, have you ever been taught to cook? Because you're not allowed to say you're a bad cook until you've like spent 4 weeks in my home cooking school and gotten through it. And I guarantee you will come out the other end and you'll be like, oh my God, I know what I'm doing. And it's really good.
Yeah. We're kind of obsessed with cooking shows and like all the chef's tables and like all the the different things. Not necessarily because we're like super gourmet cooks, but I'm like absorbing the information by osmosis.
Oh, but I love to cook though.
Yeah. You love I feel like I'm a good cook. I know, like, I think I make delicious food. I like my food. You always say it's good.
It is really good.
But I think one of my biggest struggles, and I think this is many people's struggle, and probably definitely during the pandemic and summer vacation with my son at home too, is it's like, oh my gosh, I have to cook 3 meals a day now. What?
Totally.
I don't have the time, the energy, the like mental, emotional, physical resources to do this.
But I mean, at the same time, like normally I would just have a coffee in the morning and it would just like last me until I finally get hungry. But you woke me up this morning with an omelet that broke my face. It was so good.
Nice.
And like, how long did that take you? Like 15 minutes?
So simple, yeah.
You made
Not
a
even
perfect
like
omelet.
10
It was
minutes.
gooey in the middle. It was everything you wanted it to be.
Yeah, I mean, and I think we make this like a really big thing in our mind. And this is sort of one of the things that you and I connected on was Marie Forleo's Time Genius course about time being an emotional experience. And I think a lot of times when we think about preparing food and like cooking and planning and all of that, we get into a very kind of like emotionally taxed state.
Absolutely.
Which makes it difficult to do the thing.
It's a number of things, right? Because there's a constant banter in the background in our society telling us you're too busy to cook. You're too busy. It's too hard to do this. Oh no, cooking like that is only for foodies. Only if you're on cooking shows can you really cook. Like it's a constant background noise. And we absorb it and we kind of don't even realize that we're absorbing it. But really, when you take a step back and when you look at, like, I know you guys travel a ton. When you look at other cultures in the world, it's like, yes, there are fine dining restaurants, but most people in their homes and even at, everyday restaurants, they're about finding joy in the everyday foods. And those are nourishing, delicious, awesome foods. And I learned that for the first time in Greece. I had lived in France for a year and really never found my footing with French food, to be honest.
Really?
It was very haute cuisine at the time. And I was a student and I was eating, I was still in the peaks and valleys, or I was still in the
you need to have money to eat well.
Oh God, yeah. I was eating
beet
like
salad
green
and
beans.
Fries. It goes along. That's all I ever ate in France. Beet salad and fries.
I mean, but see, I hated vegetables. Hated vegetables.
That's a problem
for a long time. So I ate horribly. But then I spent a summer in Greece, and in Greece, it was this awakening of simple foods prepared simply, but like a fried egg.
Yeah, so
from
good.
The chicken over there, fried in the olive oil from those, pressed from those trees over there. It was like, it was just mind blowing.
Well,
and
goat cheese and salt goes a long way on just about anything, and that's what I think about vegetables. Is like they're a vehicle for salt. That and
everything.
Fat,
let's face it,
and
everything's a
pepper sauce and
salt
acid. Like that's
an acid.
That's what you're looking for. Is like, I can't just eat those 4 things: salt, fat, acid, heat. I need something to put that onto. Whatever I put that onto is going to taste good.
Well, and I will say, in defense of veggies, it's definitely, there are cooking techniques that you can use with veggies to be able to cut back on like the amount of cheese or the amount of fat. Like cooking with healthy fats and veggies is awesome. Like have at it. But it's the like the, you know, melted butter or the tons of cheese or the whatever, like there are, or the cream, or, you know, there are cooking techniques that will coax out flavors in veggies in ways that are like amazeballs. And you don't need those, I call them crutches. You don't need to lean on those crutches of the, you know, I call them indulgence fats, you know, like the indulgence things where it's like, they're great in little bits or every once in a while. But when you start working them in every day, they take a toll, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, for sure.
So what are some of the strategies that you would introduce to someone who's really like struggling with time and like this idea of, you know, because I think that's why also a lot of people order. I mean, that's why I order in when I order in, right? Totally. It's just like, I can't face it.
Absolutely.
I'm hungry and tired. You want me to cook now?
I'm hungry and tired. Absolutely. Well, a lot of it is being proactive, and a lot of it is like defusing things for ourselves and just making it less complicated. So I actually have a really great free training that I'll give you the link to for your peeps, great. But it's how to plan, prep, and cook easy weeknight meals. So it's really great techniques in there. But in a nutshell, I like to recommend, you know, when people are like, okay, what should I eat for breakfast and for lunch and for dinner and for breakfast and for lunch and for dinner? Like, who has the mind capacity to figure all that out, right? And even if you map it out, even if you have all that mapped out, by like day 3, that's not like lunch.
You're exhausted.
You're done. So I like to say, like, for breakfast and for lunch, keep it simple. You know, for breakfast, have like 3 to 5 things that you cycle through. You know, for me, it's some kind of an egg. Love eggs of all nature. So it's like right now I know I've got really, really good whole grain toast and a half an avocado in my kitchen. And I am going to make avocado toast with fried egg for breakfast, right?
Waiting for you. Yeah.
Yeah. And then it could be, you know, yogurt with nuts and fruit. Like what works for you? What are 3 to 5 breakfasts that work for you that you can wake up and be like, I want this or this or this. Easy peasy. Like you don't even need to be through your first cup of coffee to answer that question, right? You can do that. And then for lunches, I'm a big fan, and this actually ties into the smart meal planning approach that I like to use for dinner, kind of feeds into lunches. So dinner is really the biggest struggle for everybody. We found like, you know, 80% of the struggle is dinner, right?
Yeah, totally.
So I like in my whole thing, when I finally answered how I should be eating, what I should be eating, what I wanted to eat, to put on that nourished plate, you know, I finally figured out how to cook it, how to enjoy it, how to find joy in these veggies and everything. And then I became a mom. And then I was like, right? Oh my God, like I've got 20 minutes. How do I do this now? You know?
Less.
So, so that was like a lot of trial and error to figure out how that happened. And through that trial and error, I developed this meal planning approach that I call Nourish 1, 2, 3. And so it's based on, you start out by picking, we like to start with the vegetable and then work out from there, whatever other, you know, protein or whole grain you're on your plate. But so you pick, let's say green beans, you know, you want to cook with green beans. And then you make a simple core recipe from it. So it could be like garlicky sauteed green beans. Then delicious. I know, right? And then you're deliberately making enough for leftovers. You're deliberately doubling a batch and making a reinvention recipe or 2 from that. So then it could be like fusilli pasta with garlicky green beans and goat cheese, right?
Yeah. There you go.
You've already got the base for what you're making for dinner. So then the way that plays out over the week is that first night you're making, I like to make 3 cores. So then you have sort of a mix and match plate. So you might have those garlicky green beans and golden tofu and coconut rice, right? Okay. So you've got that on your plate. Gorgeous plate.
Wow. Yeah.
And then you're doubling those. You're making double batches of those, which takes nowhere near the amount of time that it does to start from scratch. Like doubling a batch of rice takes how much extra time?
Zero.
Like that.
Literally zero.
Right? Yeah. So, and then you tuck those away in the fridge, and you have to tuck the leftovers away in the fridge before you serve them, because otherwise everybody will eat them up. So then you got the leftovers. And then Monday night, Tuesday night, Wednesday night, then you're making those reinventions, and those reinventions come together in like 10 minutes, 20 minutes, like that.
That's
And
so
that's what
good.
finally worked for me, and how I was able to, get these nourishing meals on the table night after night and after night after night. And so I created a whole meal planning program on that called Cook the Seasons. And it's great. And even, to go back to Time Genius, right? And the way that you hold time. I find that also we tend to, there's a really good word that I can't come up with right now, but like combine.
We compress time to the amount of time we give it. Is that what you're thinking?
Well, we also we tend to look at time all as the same thing. Like we're conflating
time.
Like time over the weekend when we could be enjoying time in the kitchen and maybe like snapping beans with our kids on the front porch and have it be an enjoyable time. We're conflating that with it's Tuesday night and we've got this and I've got to work late and my kids got to be here and I got to get dinner on the table, right?
Yes.
But if we separate those, then we can treat that time in the way that it's meant to be, So I call, when we're cooking those double batches of those 3 core recipes, I call that the big cook. And that's the big cook. And you're spending an hour and a half in the kitchen, but you're jamming you're jamming some music. You maybe got some wine going,
you're having a good time.
Maybe you get the family involved. Like that's the time to enjoy. And then everything's tucked away. And then on Tuesday night, when you need dinner, that's when, the pot of water goes on to boil. You got the pasta, you pull the green beans out, boom, dinner,
It's super fascinating because I feel like what you're describing is the same kind of relationship I have towards, like, say, a spiritual practice like meditation or yoga. Is that when I enter in that space, I'm always so relieved to finally be there. It's like, I remember this. Totally. This is nice. This is so good. I can just fucking sit here. And it's the same way with cooking. Like when it comes around, time for dinner, I would much rather just be lying down somewhere. But if I actually go into the kitchen and start cooking, there's such a sense of relief to finally be in the mental space where I can just go through a process and work to be as efficient as possible, and then work to be it's a sense of aesthetic appreciation of the moment, but also the flavor. And it's just an extraordinarily beautiful human moment that I sacrifice so I can lie down and watch Rachel Maddow, and then
right.
I'm watching Rachel. You want me to cook? It's like, get off the fucking.
You're 1000% spot on, right? It's an opening. And I think that this is something that way too many people miss. And this is where the background noise blinds us from this opening, where it's like, just like when you step onto your yoga mat, you're in this different world and you just feel rooted to the core, and it brings you peace and it brings you joy and it brings you openness and all of that. Cooking can be the same way. Food can be the same way. It's an opportunity for us to mindfully enter into this much deeper connection. I mean, it is literally, we are consuming the bounty that the earth has provided for us. People have shepherded to our tables. Like, oh my God, there's a massive, almost holy element to it, and obviously you don't have to like be that reverent every single time, but to even be remotely aware and mindful of that when you're slicing an heirloom tomato, and really looking at it and being like, my God, this is gorgeous, or when you're sauteing some garlic and you're like, it's a whole experience that connects us to the earth, and it connects us to those who provided the food, and it connects us to a deeper part of ourselves, when we go into it in that mindful way. Totally.
I love that.
The problem is that it's Sunday morning for most of our listeners, and they're trying to get their yoga practice done, and now they're hungry. That's a shame. I'm really intrigued.
I want another omelet already.
I know. I want to ask you, because I want to get back to how you healed yourself and where you're at now. And I just want to kind of start and kind of go back a little bit. You grew up in Peoria, or did you move around a little bit after that?
I grew up in the North Shore of Chicago. So yeah,
you did.
my family, my brother and mother and father lived in North Shore of Chicago, and everybody else. Bannockburn, Deerfield.
Okay, yeah, Deerfield. I know. Yeah, okay.
Yes.
And so, why would you, of all places, go to Tulane for school?
It's funny you asked that, because my daughter is in the midst of applying for colleges, and so I was a musician growing up. And
amazing.
Tulane was on the Common Application, and I literally knew like one person that went there, and I knew there was a lot of music at Tulane, and I was like rock band musician, not a like sing in the choir musician.
Yeah.
So I checked the box. And I also had a fascination with French and had been studying French since 5th grade. And they had, I knew that they had a junior year abroad program that was one of 2 in the US where you had to be fluent in French. It was very competitive to get in. And if you did, then you were enrolled directly at the Sorbonne. And I had set a goal in 5th grade to go to the Sorbonne. So Common Application, music, Paris, baby.
Right. Amazing. And did you do that your junior year at the Sorbonne?
I did.
Amazing. That is fabulous. I
tell you though, it was not because I was smart enough to go. It was because I was so passionate. I literally would go and sit in the JYA office, junior year abroad office, like multiple times a week. And I'd be like, I really, 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 really want to go to Paris. I really they must have been like, my God, let's just send this girl to get her out of her hair.
That's funny. I did something very similar. I was at the Art Institute. They gave us the Terra Museum gave us an opportunity to go to Giverny, and I just fucking begged them every day. And they had to send one representative from the School of the Art Institute of Chicago to Giverny. And I was like, I'm your guy. I'm the only one here doing landscape painting. There's no one else that you can send. And I just wore them down.
Yes.
I wore them down. Yes. And they sent me. I said, oh, fine. And they sent me.
High five, man. That's awesome. Five. You studied at Giverny?
Yep. Yeah, I was there for the summer. I was across the street from Monet's home at the Terra Museum facilities. And so then I would go and I would make landscape paintings. I did landscape paintings of the tour buses that came in every day.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. I was like, these are beautiful. These tour buses are beautiful.
Is so amazing. We took my daughter, probably 5 years ago or so. We were in Paris and my daughter was sort of studying, the great masters in 6th grade or whatever. And so she wanted to go to Giverny and I'm up. So we took the train out to Giverny. And then I had this great idea of like, when we get back to Paris, let's go to l'Orangerie and we'll see those great, awesome canvases. Right. And that was really brilliant. That was really cool to go
Connect the dots.
Right to there.
Yeah.
Where I went wrong was then I was like, well, let's go to the Louvre. With a 12-year-old, and I
spent like an hour and a half in line to get into the Louvre.
Oh my God. Yeah. Well, and then you're in it and it was hot as shit and it's not air conditioned. And I have this memory of it's like 7:00 at night and I'm like, she's on my back, just bawling, just wailing because she's
12-year-old.
Yes, but she couldn't even. Her
poor thing.
And I'm running with her on my back from one air vent to another, and we just stand over the air vent, and then we run to the next air vent and stand. Yeah. So we did real well with the Giverny and the l'Orangerie, but do not do don't tack on the Louvre after that.
There should be like an age requirement, right?
See, like, the requirement
like 16 plus to enter the Louvre.
The requirement for me is if you're going to go to an art museum with me, then you have to commit to 4 hours. Anything less than that is I'm annoyed as fuck. Like you just go home. Just fucking go home. You're not going to be here for the whole thing.
We went to so many art museums on our honeymoon that he finally I was like, let's go here. And he's like, I think I've had enough. And I was like, what?
Oh my God.
I wore you out?
No way.
So we're going to bed at 2 a.m. after dinner, which is at fucking Madrid. We wake up at 5 a.m. to teach yoga for 3 hours. And it's like, let's go to museums. Like, I'm tired. I'm tired now. Don't blame it on the fucking painting. Oh my God. So you decide to study. Were you full on music and French major?
No, not at all. I was actually communication by that point. And I was playing in a band, not in Paris. I don't think I played in a band in Paris, but in New Orleans I was playing in a band.
Okay. Amazing.
And it was pretty cool. It was pretty fun. And I was I was studying communication. I was actually the first communication major ever to go on the junior year abroad program. Story. And minoring in French. So I had nothing, like food was not at
on
all
your radar.
part of my picture there. And like I said, I hated vegetables.
Right.
Like really, really hated vegetables.
Wow.
And so it wasn't, I know. You wouldn't think it now. But I used to like make people like wipe out a bowl if there were beets in it. And I would gag. Like,
oh man.
gag
Beets
if
are
I had
amazing.
to, like,
You can't live in France for a year and not eat beets every day.
No, it was, I wouldn't touch the things. I would gag.
Most beautiful beets on the planet.
Oh my God, totally. Yeah. No. So it wasn't until I was married and had gone through, all this pain and had the lupus diagnosis.
But this guy, was he a native of Louisiana, or was he from someplace else?
My husband?
Yeah.
He's from Detroit.
He's from Detroit. That's right. You said that. He's from Detroit.
He's from Detroit.
Weird. And you went out to San Francisco together?
He was living in San Francisco. He was actually living in Southern California at the time. And I was living in New York. And a mutual friend introduced us. So we had a bi-coastal relationship until we got married. And then we decided we were going to settle in San Francisco.
Okay.
And and I was just starting to become, funny enough, a food writer and breaking into food writing. But it was at the time of, like, I was writing for Cooking Light and I was writing for Health. And it was very much like best fat-free, snacks. And it was all like everything was fat-free and light and this and that. So it had nothing to do with vegetables. Totally.
At that time, everybody was fat-free and eating pounds of sugar.
Right? Oh my God, totally.
Yeah.
And like
lean cuisine.
Tons of carbs and tons of all this refined food. So when I was had gotten the lupus diagnosis, when you get a diagnosis like that, the doctor looks at you and they're like, you're going to need to change the way you eat and you're going to need to change your life. And then they stop. Like, they don't tell you how. They just, like, that's it. And so I leaned into my writing credentials and started asking for nutrition focused assignments and was talking to experts around the world. Basically, totally selfishly asking the question, like, what should I eat to nourish my body?
Wow. Amazing opportunity.
Across the board. And a bunch of 20-year studies, really big 20-year studies were kind of coming to fruition at that time, 20 years and longer. And across the board, everybody was saying, eat lots of seasonal vegetables cooked with healthy fats, rounded out with well-sourced protein. It could be plant-based protein, could be grass-fed beef, could be sustainable seafood, whatever fits your profile, and whole grains and legumes. So that's the plate. I mean, I heard this from, University of Athens professors and researchers to Harvard researchers. That was it. And I was like, this is awesome. I know what I need to eat. Only problem is I still hated vegetables.
You don't like it. You know what to eat, but you just don't like it. Yeah.
That's so funny.
So that became a quest in and of itself where I was, but this is like what I was talking about before, the hump, where you you hit the hump and rather than think you're going to get over the hump in 2 weeks with a fad diet, I was like, oh, okay, clearly I need to learn how to make these foods taste so good that I'm going to want to eat them every day, And so that was really like the part 2 of the quest.
I have to say that was also my experience. Like, growing up in Illinois, the idea that I had of vegetables was like corn, which is not a vegetable.
Which isn't a vegetable.
And then everything else came out of a can.
Yeah.
Totally.
And so that's disgusting. And no human being should eat that.
The asparagus that sticks to your fingers, like the canned asparagus that literally is army green and sticks to your fingers.
All the canned spinach. And so if it's a vegetable, it comes out of a can and then it goes with your meat and potatoes. And I didn't like meat anyway. And so I just ate potatoes, or I would eat, cereal.
We eat a lot of frozen vegetables. Better than canned, but still.
I don't know. I don't know. That's
still a little lacking something.
At a certain point, I think I lived on lean cuisine from the age of 12 till I started cooking for myself, and I said, Mom, I'm just going to cook for myself now. So having to learn that you could do anything with a vegetable, you didn't need to just can it and then,
Totally.
mash it and like the
Boil
whole
it.
thing.
Or
It's
steam it or boil it.
yeah.
Like,
Steam it, boil it.
yeah.
I think that was the times, right? People
was-
weren't really, I mean, in a way it's interesting. Like food now, I think there's so much more awareness, consciousness. Like there's food is art now, right? Like we're
It's the age of the art
age of
form.
like,
But that can
food.
almost come with its own, like that worries me a little bit too. And it's
Mhm.
Elizabeth Gilbert's Big Magic. You
Yeah.
guys read that?
I
Right?
haven't read
She
that.
talks about like art being something that is it's up here, it's fine art, and
Yes,
so
yes.
it removes creativity from the everyday person.
Right.
I feel like in a way we tend to do that with food too, where it's like food is art. Oh, but if food is art, then I need to be a trained chef
Right.
with a
To
white
do
coat
food.
to be able to make food that tastes good. And I'm not a
Yeah.
trained chef with a white coat. I don't have time to
Right.
do that.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to kind of say, you know what I mean? And then
It's
people
the
just write it
same.
off.
It's the same with music. It's the same with art,
Yeah.
that people feel intimidated by it. Like that's something for
Right.
them, not for
Right.
me. I'm a
Right.
consumer. I sit on my couch and watch it happen.
Right.
I'm
I
not
cannot tell you the amount of
participating.
times, totally. But it's like people will say to me that, I remember my aunt actually came for a visit one time, and I'd like worked all day and it was a busy day, and I made roast chicken and veggies, like roast chicken and root veggies. It took me 5 minutes maybe to like prep everything and stick it in the oven, and it's delicious, right? I mean, it's delicious. And she ate it, and like everybody went gaga. And these are, my relatives from Illinois.
Yeah.
Went gaga. And she was like, oh, well, but of course you know how to do this. Like this must have taken you hours, but you're such a foodie. And I hear that all the time. Like, of course you sauteed mushrooms. You're such a foodie. Oh, of course you did
But
this.
of course,
And I'm like,
of course you
but
saute mushrooms. What
you
are you talking
could
about?
too. Right. People make a bigger deal out of it. If it tastes good, they think it must be really complicated or too much for them to be able to do. And that's not the case.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I think like exactly what you're saying, this used to be something that was even a bit more in our culture, in our DNA, before restaurants, before fast food, before, I don't know, the 50s or something. I'm not sure where to really place it in our history, but
Yeah, you're right. It is. It's like when
kids learn to cook, right? Like children learn to cook from their mothers or their grandmothers, and you hear this like story in every single cooking show that we watch. Oh, my grandmother taught me to cook, and it's they learned at it's just something that was in the culture of the family at the time. And I think a lot of us grew up in families where our moms were working full time. They didn't have time to cook. Maybe they were single moms,
Yep.
And we didn't really have that in our culture, in our context. And so it seems very difficult because
you're absolutely right. No, there's a risk there. And that's one of the things I love about home cooking school is that we have students who are in their 20s. We have students who are in their 70s. Yeah. And it's this gap in our culture where there is not that skill base that's handed down. And I kind of gleaned all over the place and built it myself. And now I get to share it with others because it makes such a ginormous difference. People that I asked at the beginning of it, scale of 1 to 10, how good of a cook do you feel like you are? And I mean, many people say, 2, maybe 5. Right. The people that say 2, by the end, 4 weeks. 4 weeks. This is it. They're at like an 8 or a 10.
That's amazing.
It's amazing. So it's not rocket science at all. It's available to everybody. You know?
And I like too that you say it's a practice, right? Like it's something that you just have to kind of take up, and that it can be part of like a spiritual practice even, right? Connecting to nourishment, connecting to the earth, connecting to your body, connecting to your spirit.
I think just to piggyback on the Harmony, I feel like that there's even like something kind of deeply rooted that's also very cultural about being white and Midwestern, is that we're it's so ingrained in us to be passive consumers or passive observers. Like at a recital, you just sit there. Like that's you're not doing a waltz or a dance.
Right.
And coming down to New Orleans was a thing that I felt like what I really learned culturally was how to participate in art whether it's dancing, it's music, it's painting, it's food, it's watching the sports is very different in New Orleans. Watching the Saints is very different in New Orleans than it is watching the Bears. Yeah. Everyone just kind of sits and watches the Bears, but in New Orleans, you are an active participant in the thing. Yeah. And being an active participant in life is not something that white people are great at. And I feel like that's kind of what you're asking us to do with your book, is to be more, is to encourage us to be more active participants in our own life in just a very simple way, which is, what do we eat at night?
Yep. For sure. And there is, Harmony, you were talking about a spiritual practice, and this is, a spiritual practice, a yoga practice, an eating practice. Like, to me, they're very, very aligned. And it is that, I find that people think like, oh, I think I said this earlier, like, oh, it's cooking, I should just be able to know how to do this. But it's like, would you ever, your first time doing yoga, would you ever expect to be doing like, perfect down dogs, or even, like whatever, right? It's not going to be perfect. You'd never pick up a violin and expect to be able to just play it. Right. You'd have to learn things. You'd have to practice. You'd have to be okay with sounding screechy when you first started, and learning how to make it sound good. Like, there's a whole process. And for whatever reason, American modern society just does not give food that room, And so it's like, when you hold it as a practice, it kind of changes everything, And even looking at things like, we tend to take for granted, even, I was thinking about this, the tools, and I keep talking about home cooking school, and I don't mean to, but we even go back and look at like we start out by looking at the kitchen and like, do you have the right tools to be able to cook the meals that you want to? Because we think like kitchen tools means like fancy this and fancy that and really expensive this, but it's not. It's like the basic tools to be able to make this work. And I was thinking like, just recently, I have a really painful ganglion cyst that's like in a really inoperable place. And so I got to the place with yoga where I just couldn't do it. It was horrible. Sure. And then I found these fabulous grips.
Oh yeah, the bars.
And it's so awesome. And now I can do yoga again because I have this piece of equipment that works for me. Yeah. And I think that there's a great analogy there for a wobbly cutting board and a crappy knife. If you cut a wobbly cutting board and a crappy knife,
odds are very good you're going to be
frustrated and you're going to hurt yourself.
Yeah.
And then you got a nice, big, spacious, sturdy cutting board and a really awesome sharp knife, and you have the skills to be able to use that knife. You're going to be able to get through all that prep super quickly. You're going to enjoy doing it, and it's going to transform everything. So it's like, we don't think of that stuff, right?
I told Harmony this 2 nights ago. I was yelling at you about your knife. I was like, you didn't sharpen your knife first, and then she's like hacking away at garlic. It's like, you're gonna cut yourself. You're gonna cut yourself. It's like, you had the garlic in your hand. You're stabbing at your hand with a knife, and I was like, man.
I wasn't. I was cutting all the cloves from the.
You're cutting all the cloves all at once. That's not how. Get it. First of all, at least sharpen your knife. At least so that you can actually do the job you're trying to do unsafely.
It was fine. It all worked out. No fingers were lost in the experiment.
I go over to your parents' house. What's the first thing that I do?
Funny. Yeah, well, that's
the first thing I do. I sharpen their knives. It's like, we're gonna cook
come
today.
Over and sharpen my knives.
We're gonna cook today.
It was time to sharpen knives.
I do. I've got 30 seconds to sharpen my knife so I don't cut myself.
I gotta tell you, I suck at sharpening knives. I take them to the knife sharpener, like at the farmer's market.
No, you do this for 30 seconds, and it's sharp.
No, I'm with you.
I'm like, that's awesome. It's a fabulous practice.
In India, they have a guy who comes around door to door.
No, you don't need that guy.
If you want your knife sharpened.
You don't need that guy. You just sharpen.
We need more of that.
I need that guy.
Every time you sit down to cook, you spend 30 seconds to sharpen the knife you're going to use because it's sharp. And then you cut them tomatoes and they're good.
we all need to know our boundaries too, right? And like for me, knife sharpening is just one of those bridge too fars, kind of,
Right. I'm with you.
It's a bridge too far.
He sharpens them. Why do I need to?
You
I don't
sharpen
need
him every time you use them.
Right.
They're getting sharp at least once a week. I don't need to do it.
Every damn day. Every day, once a week. You're going to cut yourself.
So
how many times have you cut yourself in the house?
Well, that has nothing to do with the sharpness.
How many times have I cut myself in the house?
Has to do with coordination.
It does not. It is a practice. That's what she's talking about. She's talking about practice.
Yeah,
we're talking about practice.
We're talking about, look at you. You're pulling up your New Orleans accent now.
I know.
I know. I really, it's so good. I think that also the interest in food, like you're saying, becomes even more important because the other thing that can happen, I think, is you get kind of just tired or you're just like, I can't do it, or I don't want to do it. And then you're not really eating properly or regularly. And then you're like binging on the stuff
bag of potato chips,
isn't great, right? Like the bag of potato chips,
carbs
or the
and salt. What more do you need?
Because you're like, oh my God,
whatever, right? Easy, just
absolutely
fast.
It's umami. That's what you're eating.
Yeah. So having that practice and also making it a part of your life kind of puts you in a different place where you're not like so hungry or your body's craving from like this really like primal place and you're just responding to instinct at the time rather than feeling in control of your choices, really, right?
And it feeds into itself, it feeds into itself when you're eating in the way that you want to eat.
Yeah.
That nourished plate, you have more energy, you have more calm, you have more clarity. And so you're able to sort of act on that. And then you feel rewarded, and so it's this upward spiral. Yeah. Whereas when you're eating crap, we all know. And this is, you're asking about how when I changed my plate to that nourished plate, I dropped 20 pounds without even knowing it, like without even thinking about it. I was like, hey, my pants don't fit anymore. And I've been dieting forever to try and lose that plate, So I'm like not focusing on it and I'm just shifting my plate and it's gone. And then my fibro bouts started to come a lot less frequently and a lot less intense. And within a couple of years, they just stopped coming at all. So it's huge. It was a huge impact.
How long has it been in check now?
Oh, over a decade.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Wow.
Yeah. And I'm 52 now, proudly, and I feel so much better than I did in my 20s. I can't even tell you.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Wow.
Yeah, so good. And such like a hopeful message, because I do think, as people maybe age or go through stressful situations or genetics, whatever it is, things do come up where, you maybe feel out of control with your health, or like something's happening to you that you're not in control of. And it's so hopeful to hear that there are things you can do that will actually help you feel better and have some control in a certain way over the outcomes.
And there's something else too that I think is worth mentioning, is that food is so divisive right now, right? It's like people are, identifying themselves by, I'm keto, I'm gluten-free, I'm vegan, I'm this, I'm that. And there's all these identities that are wrapped up in food that are very divisive. And, people make their decisions for whatever reasons that they do. But I like to counsel people to start, if you're just making the transition from like meat and potatoes and lots of, processed food, start at a nourished plate. Start there. If you're used to eating meat and potatoes, then maybe shift your plate to like really delicious veggies and then some whole grains and then some like well-sourced meat, and see what that does for you, And then if you want to go from there and you want to try a vegetarian lifestyle, awesome. If you want to try this, but start with that nourished plate, because that's a place that you can stay for the rest of your life. I have, and it will bring you lasting health, lasting joy, lasting ease. Whereas I find what happens now is that people tend to go from like processed food into one of the restrictive diets, right?
Yeah.
And so they'll start to feel good because the processed food is gone and they're suddenly eating like real food.
Yeah.
But they're attributing the fact that they feel good to the diet when the diet itself is likely not creating all of the good. Might be creating some of the good, but not creating all of the good. The actual good is coming because they've shifted their plate away from a processed food towards real food.
Yeah.
But then oftentimes those restrictive diets are tough to sustain, and people it doesn't bring the joy long term, and there are times when we'll want to explore different paths. We've been vegetarian at times. We've been, we've had to do more restrictive diets at times. There are times for those things. But if people have this sort of home base that they can always return to of that nourished plate and that place of like deep joy, that's really powerful. And then the other things become, curiosity and experiments. And if it works, awesome, continue. But if it doesn't, you have a place to come back to. You're not going back. You're not coming off of, oh my God, I can't sustain this keto diet. And you're going back to Mickey D's. It's like there's this really wonderful home base to come back to that will sustain you for the rest of your life.
Yeah. And I think that brings up also a really interesting point too, because sometimes we do get like into these diet groupings, like you're vegan and you're not actually eating whole foods or being healthy, right?
Gosh,
you're eating like the processed cheese, like the vegan cheese, which is actually pretty terrible for you.
Totally.
You're just eating more processed food, but it's like vegan. So it doesn't necessarily mean that it's healthy though. And the same thing can even happen with like keto diet, right? So now you're just eating bacon and eggs all the time, every day. Like that's not healthy for you either.
Right? Well, and even with gluten-free, I mean, you could kind of go everywhere with that. We have a lot of people in Cook the Seasons who are vegetarians who recognized that they were basically eating pasta and cheese all the time. And they were like, oh, I'm not eating, like I'm a vegetarian, but I'm not eating vegetables, So you come to Cook the Seasons to learn how to cook really delicious vegetables. But but even with like gluten-free is such a big thing. And there are obviously people that have, serious gluten issues. And I totally get that. But I find a lot of people that I talk to who are eating gluten-free don't really know why they're doing it. They're just doing it because they think it's healthier.
They're doing it for spiritual development.
Right. And oftentimes that means eating like processed gluten-free things.
Right. Which isn't great either. Yeah.
No. So it's not serving them in a really wonderful way. So there's, it's worth it to examine like, why are you doing this? Is there another way of doing it? Does it make sense to kind of back up, start at a nourished plate, and then explore venues from there, explore paths from there.
Yeah. Beautiful, beautiful. I love it. So if people want to get your book Nourished or join your Nourished evolution, where can they do that?
You can get my book Nourished on Amazon for sure, on Barnes & Noble. Those are probably the best places to grab it. And actually, when you do, shoot me an email at support@nourishevolution.com and let me know that you bought it, because we have got a really great bonus ebook that goes along with it.
Cool.
It's my memoir, so it's a lot of story, and I have a recipe with each chapter. But there are a lot of recipes that I didn't have room to include, so we put 12 of them in a bonus ebook. So I'll have to send them.
Fabulous.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And then,
that's amazing.
And then, I would love, you can head to nourishevolution.com, and we've got lots of information on there. We've got our programs on there. I'd love to have people sign up for our how to plan, prep, and cook easy weeknight meals to get some of these tips firsthand. And a really great, again, kind of bonus ebook and worksheets and things to put it into practice.
And are you still doing your cooking school?
And home cooking school, yes. Also on Nourished Evolution. We really, I'm really proud of the suite of offerings that we've put together over the years, because it's all about empowering the home cook. It's all about helping people become more competent, confident home cooks. And that just really moves the needle. So there's home cooking school. We have our kind of quick and dirty real food reset. It's a 10-day real food reset.
Oh, cool.
Which is also awesome. And then our, ongoing meal planning program. That's a great system, Cook the Seasons.
Great.
So, yeah. We got you covered from start to finish.
It's a real pleasure to have this conversation with you today. You're out there in California? Are you in Healdsburg now?
I'm in Santa Rosa.
Mm-hmm. Santa Rosa. Okay, that's I'm sorry, I forget. Is that south of San Francisco? It's up north?
Yeah, north of San Francisco. It's only about 15 minutes south of Healdsburg. So yeah, it's about an hour.
Not far from the French Laundry.
No, that's over in Napa. French Laundry's over in Napa. It's about an hour away.
Well, we'll get back there. I'll be all right.
One day we'll get there.
Yeah.
Well, it was a pleasure, you guys. Really, really fun to have this chat.
Thank you.
Thank you. Awesome.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Finding Harmony. With me, your host, Harmony Slater. You can find out more information on my website, harmonyslater.com, and I look forward to connecting with you again soon.
Standing in eternity's shadow, watching the breaking